Welcome back to the channel, my aspiring FreeMelons. I hope you're all doing very, very well. My name is Martyr. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking a little bit of fitness. We're going to be speaking about flexibility and how you need to orient yourself in relation to flexibility to get the most out of flexibility style training. Let me start by saying that your flexibility and your mobility is so important and so integral to your ability to do anything physical in life that it shouldn't be overlooked, and it often is. It doesn't matter what type of athletic endeavor that you are pursuing. Flexibility is going to give you a solid foundation upon which to build anything else that you choose to do, whether leisure activity or more serious competition. Having good flexibility and mobility in the joints is so important regardless of what you're doing. It'll always help you. And today we're going to be talking about flexibility and the best ways to go about cultivating it. So the way we'll do this is that first I'll give you the quick lecture on how to develop flexibility properly, and then I'll take you through a couple of movements that I did in my home gym just to give you an example of how to apply the theory that I'm going to be teaching you. Okay, so there are two major things that are going to enhance your flexibility. Now, when people ask me, how do you get flexible? What's a good way to approach the routine or whatnot? What I usually tell them first is met with the following reaction. What are you talking about? And it's because my first answer is, what do you eat? Your diet is critically important in how good your flexibility is going to be. Really? Diet? And it's like, yes, of course. Yes, the food that you put into your body that irrevocably, inevitably, inexorably is absorbed and becomes the building blocks, the foundation upon which your physical tissue is built. Yes, that is very important in how flexible your muscles are. Imagine if I took some time to build an incredible boat, and my neighbor comes and asks, hey, how did you build such a great boat? And I tell him, oh, well, what material did you use to build your boat? And he's like, material? And I say, yes, material. The material that you use to build your boat is going to be very important in how your boat functions. And the neighbor says, what are you talking about? You see how silly it is, right? Okay, your diet is so important in how well your muscles respond to flexibility. Okay, that's number one. And of course, number two is how you actually train your flexibility. So I'm going to do this in reverse order. I'm going to start with how you train flexibility first, and then I'll do the diet stuff after, just very briefly, because I know that you're not here because you want to hear diet advice. You want to know how to get flexible. Okay, so let's start with first the errors in flexibility training. Most people, when they train flexibility in a passive way, or exclusively a passive way. Passive flexibility meaning that you are using either gravity or pressure to artificially stretch your muscles without your own muscular activation doing that work. You go onto the floor and you just lie down and stretch your arm or stretch your leg or whatever, or you jump into a machine and you crank it and it splits you apart. Okay, so these are passive flexibility exercises. Another mistake people make is that prior to exercise, they will warm up with passive flexibility. And this is largely an error. This is not something you should do. You should be doing a dynamic warm-up, which will better prepare you for whatever it is that you're about to do physically. Okay, so let's talk the logic. Now, I want you to think back to everything that you've ever done physically in your life. Any type of sport, any type of recreational activity, anything that you've practiced and then implemented in a sport or leisure scenario, okay? In all of those instances where you were performing your sport of choice, I want you to remember if the way you performed that activity was different than the way that you practiced. So did you practice one way, and then when you performed, your performance was completely different than the way you practiced? Or was it that you practiced something in order to perform it properly, or in order to perform it better, and so on performance day, you essentially performed what you've been practicing, save for maybe a bit more intensity or whatnot? Seems to follow rational logic, that you would have to practice how you intend on performing. Correct? Okay. Any type of athletic performance draws heavily on the substance of the practice. Okay? Alright, so that should make sense. What is the purpose of flexibility? The purpose of flexibility is to enhance the quality and efficiency of all of the motor skills and athletic movements and performances that you are going to make. Make you more efficient, make you more alive, make you less susceptible to injury. You're not training flexibility so you can go out and then play baseball and then just drop to the ground and let gravity stretch your leg. Then your flexibility is useless. Your flexibility has to functionally apply to the movements that you are going to be doing. Can you think of any instance where you are doing a thing and your muscles are completely relaxed and unengaged? You can't kick a soccer ball with completely relaxed muscles. You can't return a serve in tennis without engaging every single muscle in your body, right? So muscular tension is always a component of athletic movement. Thus, when you are training flexibility, if you train flexibility in a passive state, what you're doing is you are not training your muscles to have any sort of applicable value to the sport or activity that you're going to be doing. Since, in order to do that thing, you always require muscular tension. So your muscle will never have the familiarity of being tense while being long, right? Let's say you're traveling in some foreign country. You go into a restaurant, the waiter just brings you something, and it's a plate full of stuff that you've never seen before, you don't recognize at all. You're going to be met with a little bit of tension, a little bit of angst as to what exactly is in your plate because you're unfamiliar, you don't know. If you had taken time prior to going to that restaurant to go to the individual markets and test and see individual foods and maybe sample them, smell them individually, then what you would be doing is you would be developing a familiarity with all of those particular things. Now, when you go to the restaurant and that waiter brings you the exact same meal, you have no more tension associated with eating those things because you are familiar with everything in your plate. When you train your flexibility, you should be training dynamic, active flexibility. You should be conducting all of your movements, or at least as many of them as possible, with conscious, deliberate muscular tension in your muscles, so that the muscle tissues and the muscle fibers become accustomed to being long and stretched out with muscular tension. Because that is how you're going to be performing in the outside world. You will never be performing with relaxed, lax muscles. So for the purpose of this video, I want you to start thinking of flexibility not as a stretching routine that you do, but more so of a strength routine, a strength building program. Approach flexibility with the mindset that you are building strength at unfamiliar muscular ranges. Building strength at unfamiliar muscular ranges. If you train flexibility that way, then your muscle will be very, very accustomed to being very tense while being very long and stretched out. So now when you go and kick that soccer ball, the huge swinging arc of your leg doesn't disturb your muscles at all because it knows what that feels like. It knows what that is. But if you do it passively, your muscle never gets accustomed to it and you can still pull your muscles, still have injuries and whatnot, okay? Does that make sense? So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how you can implement active or dynamic stretching, right? Dynamic movements in your flexibility routine that will not only make it more exciting and more fun, but it will be much, much more helpful. So here, just adopting this very low squat position, right? You see what I'm doing is I'm not just sitting in one particular position and freezing and, you know, you're moving around. So always being active, right, with movement. And you can be creative with this. You can play with it as you see fit, but just constant movement, and then using muscular tension to bring yourself into these stretching positions. So you see here, I'm moving my hips from side to side, right? But what you can't see is that I'm always engaging very, very tightly with my muscle. Not super, super tightly, but I'm pushing into the stretches with my own muscles. Here, this one is a very good one. So you're lowering slowly and coming up, straightening your legs, all the tension through your heels. But of course, what you don't see me doing is really trying with conscious muscular effort to straighten the knees and bring the upper body down to the ground. So you are strengthening the muscle at these odd angles. This is just something I was playing around with, just trying to balance on my toes. As you can see, very hard. But you know, like I said, you can be creative with this kind of stuff. Any of the movements that you do in your flexibility routine where you can add muscular tension, do it, right? It's only going to help you. So this is just a standard squat again, moving around with it, wiggling around. So I drop into a straddle here. Now watch what I'm doing. So I'm not just hitting a long position and holding it. I'm moving down, forward, side to side, twisting my upper body and my torso, moving up and down with the laterally rotated torso. See, and just familiarizing myself with movement here. Right? Never ballistic. You do not want to be ballistically stretching your muscles, meaning violent movements up and down, but you want to have control and slowly add tension. Right? You see this? So you see how much tension I'm putting on my hamstrings and groin? Slowly, but in a controlled way. That is what's going to make you injury proof. So my muscles are getting very strong at those extreme angles, right? Even just sitting here like this, in this position where you're in your straddle and you lean forward as much as you possibly can and putting all the tension in your hamstrings to hold and balance your body, right? That tension, as you get stronger and stronger, the flexibility will just start to come. Now you'll have to excuse the suggestive sexual nature of this particular stretch, but look what I'm doing, right? So I'm coming down slowly and then tensing up, and then relaxing. Tensing up, and then relaxing. Very difficult, but very good for your flexibility. Now again here, it might look like I'm just pulling my leg without any input from my leg itself, but again, what you don't see is I'm trying to do that kick, that extension of my knee, as if my arm weren't there to support it. The arm is just there just to help it out, but what I'm actually trying to do with my body is I'm trying to make that movement as if my arms weren't there to help me out. Same thing with this particularly difficult pose, right? You see how everything's engaged, everything is tense, nothing is loose, right? All my muscles are engaged in trying to make this hold. I'll have you know, this is something that I could not do all throughout my child years. I could never do that move. It was only until I started cleaning up my diet and training in this way that I was able to do that particular hold. Another thing that you can do is develop strength in the opposing muscles to which you're flexing. So after you do, let's say, a hamstring stretch, doing these hip flexor exercises by going into a straddle or into a pike sit and trying with a straight leg to raise your legs above the ground, it's very, very difficult. And developing the strength on the front and stretching at the back, you combine the two and it just it does a world of good for the general familiarity of strength and tension in your muscles while flexing. Now, this is something that many of us are familiar with, and nothing unique or nothing groundbreaking here. Essentially what you're doing is you are tensing your muscles as hard as you can, resisting the direction of the stretch, and then relaxing. And when you relax, you move a little bit lower into the stretch. As you can see, just wiggling around, moving around, loosening the joints, rolling around the thigh in the socket, right? Just mobilizing the legs, mobilizing the joints a little bit. And then you go for another round of tension, where you're squeezing against the ground, squeezing, and then relax a little bit more. Okay? And then in that new position, you do the same thing. You just get familiar with it, you know, use your hands to support, no tension, nothing, just a little bit of movement. And then squeeze, 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 squeeze again, resisting the direction of the stretch, and then relax. And as I said earlier, you can afford to be creative with this. It doesn't matter if you do stretches that you've never seen before. I have seen this before. I'm not saying this is a new revolutionary stretch. This has been around for ages. But I'm saying you can experiment with different movements and, have fun with your flexibility. Find positions that challenge the length of your muscles, but get to those positions in ways where you're constantly engaged. And that's the secret. This in yoga is called the plow position. This stretch is extremely important. If you have any kind of back issues or tight hamstrings, this particular stretch will strengthen and lengthen everything in your posterior chain, from your Achilles, all of your erector muscles in your back, all of your hamstrings, your calves and whatnot. You need to be doing this stretch. Okay, so you'll notice here that my feet are touching the ground and my legs are straight. This is where you want to get to. You may not be able to get to this position at first. That's perfectly all right. But what you are trying to do with your muscular effort and tension is you are trying to get your feet to the floor with straight legs, okay? And you are also trying to get your hips, see how my butt is in the air? You're trying to get your butt to touch the ground on the other side, right? Where my hands are. You're trying to get your feet to touch the ground while at the same time your lower back touching the ground. You won't be able to do it, but that's what you're going to be trying to do with your muscular effort when you do this exercise, okay? If that makes sense. So in case you can't get your feet to the floor right away, go as low as you can, and wherever you're at a place where you're comfortable, then just practice straightening your legs out over and over and over. Just straighten your legs, straighten your legs. Eventually you'll get familiar with it. Your flexibility will improve quite rapidly, more than likely, and you'll be able to get your feet to touch the ground. Maybe not with straight legs, but with bent legs. You can use your hands to help you, okay? If at first you don't have the strength to straighten them on your own, you can use your hands to keep your feet anchored to the floor, and then use your muscular efforts to straighten your legs. Eventually, you want to hit that position right there. And if you can hit that position right there, I guarantee you, the aches and pains in your lower back or anywhere in your posterior chain, they will have been drastically alleviated. Just a simple bridge, very good thing to mobilize your spine, to give you that unfamiliar range. You can do little push-ups. You can play around with it, experiment, have fun. If you want tutorials on how to do a bridge properly, there's tons of other videos out there, so go check those out if you have the interest. Okay, so that does it for the functional, physical aspects of how to train flexibility properly. Of course, the diet is so important, as I mentioned earlier. When you eat properly, when you eat naturally, of foods that are designed for your biology, what happens is the waste products, the toxic waste products that are stored all over your body, they begin to get purged out of the muscle tissues themselves, out of the joints themselves. And once those waste products are eliminated, fumigated from the system, the muscles and the joints become looser, become more supple, okay, become more alive and resistant to strains and injuries. Just the whole system becomes more pliable, right? And bendy and loose, right? So I won't get into it much more than that. You have my whole channel there. You can check out how to eat and whatnot. So that information is all there for you. But my point is that when you do conduct your lifestyle in that way, by eating naturally as a human being, your flexibility will noticeably increase, noticeably improve. I noticed that big time in my life, big time. One of the most profound changes in my ability to be flexible, even after months of not stretching, is solely attributed to diet. I have gone sometimes a month or more without stretching and found that I was able to do the splits no problem, right? So, yeah, diet is huge, guys. Anyway, that does it for now. I hope you learned something from this. Make sure to subscribe to the FreeMelon Society. Always more content for you to check out. I wish you peace, harmony, happiness, love, and health, and I will see you guys next time on the FreeMelon Society.